So Taylor, how you doing, buddy? We had a great conversation last week. You have an amazing playlist. And I saw on Instagram that you took one of our conversations and did a post about the savings and loan crisis. So what did we
Yeah.
talk about last week? And you did some research. What'd you find?
Yeah. So credit to you. So the savings and loan crisis was a result of the inflation that we saw in the 70s, and it transpired from the mid 80s to the mid 90s. And full disclosure, I didn't have a full research workup on this. So I had to do some digging into this and see where the similarities were, where the differences were from today. But from what I can ascertain, and you can certainly correct me if you think I'm wrong in any of these categories, savings and loan institutions are largely banks, right? They were smaller banks in regional areas, and they didn't have the regulatory requirements that banks have these days. But the same
Sound remotely similar to what we're doing today?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. But the same circumstances, the root cause of the savings and loan crisis is what's playing out right now. So just to rehash, you probably know this, but real quick, in the 70s, we had rampant inflation. It took 3 Fed chairmen to control it. Paul Volcker was the last one who took rates, Fed funds rate, to 19%. 19. Currently, we sit at 5 for context. That's what it took in order to get inflation under control. And what happened was, just like the regional banks are facing right now, the savings and loan institutions, when you deposited money with them, would go out and buy bonds. And those bonds ended up coming underwater as higher interest rates forced down prices, and the economy started to slow down at the same time. So we started to enter an economic recession. And when economic recessions come, people withdraw money out of the bank to withstand their lifestyle because they're not making enough to cover their expenses. So therefore, these savings and loan institutions are then forced to sell bonds at inopportune times to fund withdrawals, and you start to get hit with this liquidity mismatch. And that's exactly what happened. And what the government's response was actually interesting at the time. They actually said, although you're not that heavily regulated right now, we're actually going to take down your regulations. And we're going to allow you to go out and buy things like high yield bonds, which are junk bonds, is another way of saying them, in high risk companies in the face of an economic slowdown, when these high yield bonds, junk bonds, ended up going debunked. And then from 19 kind of, or I'm sorry.
Sounds like somebody chasing yield. Sound familiar?
Yeah. Well done. I like you just bring this whole thing full circle. But yeah, so from the mid 1980s to the mid 1990s, we had a savings and loan crisis in this country, and 1,083 savings and loan institutions failed, which was exactly 32% of the broad pool of S&L institutions in the United States. Craziness.
Yeah, and the reason.
Correct me where I'm wrong too. Jump in there if I misspoke on any of it.
So far you've nailed it. The only thing that I would highlight, because I think people need to hear this, because I think a lot of folks are trying to relate this to the Great Recession. The Great Recession was Wile E. Coyote running off a cliff and falling.
Correct.
And falling and falling and falling and falling. But then building out. It was a moment. The S&L crisis was, roughly speaking, 9 or 10 years. 1,038 or 83 or whatever banks go out. Think about that.
That's a slow bleed is what that is.
Exactly.
That's 1,000 cuts.
Exactly.
Yep.
So again, that's what I'm trying to highlight for people. Please go research the S&L crisis. It's long. It's the Great Recession was a recession. The S&L crisis was 3 recessions, and they were successively worse.
Yep. You're 100% correct. Yeah, I think that people are being, the only way I can put this, and it's a big word, Pollyannish. People are being very Pollyannish about what's going on in the environment right now. The first one hit SVB, and they're like, unique scenario, got flooded with VC money, some bad loans to startup companies, compounded it,
Bad
and then
values,
Yep. That's unique to them. And then you have First Republic, and then you have Signature, and now you have a group of banks coming together, reaching out to the government saying we need help. This is not a unique scenario to any one bank. This is a systemic problem that was caused by low levels of inflation, with stimulus getting pumped behind it, driving inflation higher, driving the Fed to raise interest rates, driving down bond prices. And when you think about trying to manage a balance sheet for a bank right now, one, are you kidding me with the movement in interest rates right now? Like, we're seeing like 7 standard deviation moves, which you guys know 3 standard deviations is 99.7% of the time. It stays between those. We're seeing like 7 to 12 standard deviation moves in bond interest rates. This is what
12
they have
deviations. I read an article about 12 deviations because you're right. They've been 12. It's like 1 in 300 million. It's like some stupid number.
Yeah. So think about it this way. Like let's make this more tangible to people, I think. So think about your job is to build desks, and the underlying price of your input costs are wood. And you're trying to say, okay, I need to go out and forecast how much wood I need to buy in order to make the amount of desks I need on the other end. And I also have to know how many desks are going to be wanted on the other end. And the price of wood is going like this. And you're like, I don't know exactly how much to buy here because one, I don't even know how much is needed on the other end or being withdrawn out of the bank. And I don't know how often that's going to come and how quickly that's going to come. And buying these wood prices, AKA bond prices, with yields going like this is incredibly difficult. That's not a great analogy. I totally get it. After I said it, I was like, not perfect, but directionally.
What I would tell you, it kind of in this context, again, I believe the odds of winning the lottery are about 1 in 180 million. What we've just seen is a 1 in 300 million. So you're twice as likely to win the lottery than what we just uncovered. So that's what I would say.
And what we're referencing there, if we didn't make it super clear, is the variance in bond yields that we've seen in the past 2 weeks, how much they've jumped from peak to trough.
Yeah, it's wild to look at.
And it hasn't been one direction too. Like directionally they have come down, but there has been massive bounces intraday and intra-week.
I have to tell you, I looked this morning, rates are down pre-market. I just checked before we started. We were up. I'm shocked at the 10-year. I want to check now just because this stuff is changing so fast.
And I'm not saying that I rise.
Oh my God, up 7 points.
Yeah. So when I woke up this morning, now granted, I'm on Eastern time. So it was like 5:15 a.m. I checked rates immediately on bond yields and they were down like 15 basis points.
Yeah, I saw.
Now they're up 7 basis points. This is, and guys, for
crazy.
context,
that's a quarter.
Those are massive moves. And that's what
like
people, that's
4 hours.
That's what the banking CEOs are trying to deal with. And now don't get me wrong. I'm not bailing out banking CEOs. A lot of them have effed up and have made bad decisions along the way.
They'll be fired. Yeah.
And they will be fired. And I do think there's some criminal activity that went along behind the scenes too. Not largely, but I do think there were people.
There'll be somebody that goes to jail.
There was people that sold stock at opportune times when they were in the driver's seat of knowing what was playing out.
Yeah, somebody's going to jail. There'll be somebody wearing orange. At the end of the day, Taylor, we are educating people. We are talking about real stuff. We are not trying to scare people, but educate people. You have a wonderful Instagram and TikTok. Where should they go?
Yeah, thank you. Follow us at Life Goal Investments, plural Life Goal Investments on TikTok and on Instagram. We do, 3 or 4 posts a day, a lot of days. And then we also do lives at night, sometimes just to break down questions that people have.
Cool. And just, we need to remind Taylor, every once in a while you do a great video, send it to my team. They will load it and give you even more coverage. Thanks, buddy.